أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا زدنا علما يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك آمين. Today we will start Surah Nisa. This is a Madni Surah having 176 verses in it, and today we will do the first part, in which we will complete from verse number 1 till 10 inshallah. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. Ya ayyuhan nasu ttaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahidatin wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kaseeran wa nisaa'a wattaqullaha alladhi tasaaluna bihi wal arham inna Allaha kana alaykum raqiba. Translation of this verse is, O mankind, fear your Rabb who created you from a single soul, created therefrom its spouse, and spread from the two multitudes of men and women. Fear that Allah, by whom you ask of each other, and by way of family ties. Verily, Allah is vigilant over you. Now, verse number 2. وآتوا اليتامى أموالهم ولا تتبدلوا الخبيث بالطيب ولا تأكلوا أموالهم إلى أموالكم إنه كان حوبا كبيرا. Give to the orphans their wealth and do not exchange the bad for the good. Do not devour their wealth by mingling it with your own. It is indeed a great sin to do so. The first instruction issued in this verse is to fear Allah. This is often repeated in the Quran since it is the key to success. Sins destroy a person's worldly life as well as his life in the hereafter. Therefore, when the fear of Allah grips one's heart, committing sins becomes extremely difficult for him. Hazrat Abu Darda Raziallahu Ta'ala narrates that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam advised him thus, adopt the fear of Allah, for surely all your actions shall be beautified therefore. Narrated by Mishkatul Musabi, page 415. Thereafter, an outstanding quality of Allah is mentioned, that is, that He is the one who created you from a single soul, created therefrom its spouse, and spread from the two multitudes of men and women. The single soul referred to here is Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. The spouse referred to in the verse is Hazrat Hawa alayhi salam, whom Allah created from Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. In a narration of Muslim volume 1 page 475, Hazrat Abu Huraira Raziallahu Ta'ala reports that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, indeed women have been created from a rib. She can never remain straight upon a thing. If you wish to derive any benefit from her, you will have to do so, notwithstanding her inherent crookedness, for if you attempt to straighten her, you will break her. To break her means to divorce her. A similar narration appears in Bukhari, volume 2, page 779. From these traditions, it is established that Hazrat Hawa alayhi salam was created from the rib of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. At this juncture, many people who allow their common sense to precede their conviction in the Quran and Hadith have fallen into the error of denying the creation of Hazrat Hawa alayhi salam from the rib of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. The concept does not appeal to their minds since they have no regard for the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah guide them. And spread from the two multitudes of men and women. Hazrat Ibn Abbas Raziallahu Ta'ala narrates that 20 males and 20 females were born of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam. From these are the entire mankind was born. Narrated by Darul Mansoor, Volume 2, page 116. In these verses, Allah makes mention of His ability to create and also refers to His quality of nurturing being the Rabb. Therefore, Allah did not only halt at the creation of man, but therefore also saw to his every need by caring for him throughout his life. It is compulsory that man shows gratitude to Allah for all of these bounties, and a great form of gratitude is that a person refrain from being disobedient to Allah. The wealth and children granted by Allah should not be used in a manner that displeases Him. The verse instructs people to adopt taqwa and also furnishes the reason for this noble trait. The person who recognizes that Allah has created him and continues to nurture him shall undoubtedly inculcate taqwa in his heart. Fear that Allah by whom you ask of each other when asking their dues from others. People tend to use the name of Allah. They tell each other that they should fear Allah and hand over what is due from them. Besides this, people also ask other things using Allah's name. They sometimes exhort someone to do some work for them in Allah's name or give them something in His name. Because work is accomplished in His name, it is only right that the people fear none but Him. And be wary of family ties. Maintenance of cordial family ties was emphasized amongst the Arabs ever prior to the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would even take oaths to remind each other of his responsibility. They used say, I swear by the maintenance of family ties that you should show regard for me and not sever these ties. The verse reminds men of these oaths, telling them not to forget that these ties always be maintained. Hazrat Ans radiyallahu ta'ala narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, He who desires that his sustenance be increased and that he live a longer life should preserve cordial ties with his family. Narrated by Bukhari, Volume 1, page 885. To associate and call upon one's relative in a manner conforming to the Sharia is included in the purport of joining ties and holds great virtue. Hazrat Abdullah bin Abi Auf narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the mercy of Allah does not descend upon a community wherein any person serves family ties. Narrated by Mishkatul Masabi, Volume 2, page 420. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the person who serves family ties shall never enter Jannah. In a narration of Abu Dawud, it is narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam quotes Allah as saying, I am Allah and I am the most merciful Rahman. I have extracted the word Rahim, family ties, from my attribute. I shall join with me the person who joins family ties, and I shall sever ties with the one who serves his family ties. Narrated by Mishkatul Musabi, Volume 2, page 420. In these times, the sin of severing family ties has become so common that even those people who are regular with their salah and tahajjud are guilty of it. Some take offense at their sisters, frequently their homes, while some dislike their uncles. There are also those who do not maintain a healthy relationship with their parents. Today, people often foster good relations with others, but have no time for their own relatives. They sever ties at the slightest provocation, whereas Iman demands that a person maintain cordial relations at all times. One should always endeavor to overlook the faults of others and never let the great virtue of joining family ties escape one's grasp. Hazrat Uqba bin Amr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that he once met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and grasping hold of his hand, requested to be informed of a most virtuous action. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, O Uqba, join ties with those who sever with them. Be gracious to those who deprive you and ignore those who oppress you. According to another report it is mentioned, pardon those who oppress you. Narrated by At-Targhib wa Tarhib, Volume 3, page 342. The person who holds the opinion that he need not join ties with those who sever them with him is merely a vengeful person. Hazrat Abdullah bin Umar narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The joiner of family ties is not the one who is uh, vengeful, but the joiner of ties is he who joined despite others serving them with him." Narrated by Bukhari, Volume 2, page 886. Hazrat Abu Huraira reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The person who believes in Allah and the last day should be hospitable to his guest. The person who believes in Allah and the last day should join family ties. The person who believes in Allah and the last day should speak a good word or remain silent." Narrated by Bukhari, Volume 2, page 889. Really, Allah is vigilant over you. No action, good or bad, is hidden from Allah, and He shall confer the full retribution. Therefore, this is a repetition of taqwa in different words. It is an integral aspect of Iman that a person realizes that his Creator and Master, Allah, is aware of his every action, whether it be private or public. The guardians of orphans are now addressed. They are advised to give to the orphans their wealth and do not exchange the bad wealth for the good. Do not devour their wealth by mingling it with your own. There are three facets alluded to in this verse. The first is that the guardian should safeguard any wealth belonging to the orphan in his trust till the child reached puberty. These include all funds that the orphan may have inherited or whatever was given to the child as a gift. It should not be that the child is deprived of his or her wealth upon reaching puberty. A narration is Asbabul Nazul, page 136, tells that a person from the tribe of Bani Ghaftan refused to hand over the wealth of his ward, who was his brother's son, when the latter demanded it upon coming of age. Consequently, the two came with the issue to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereupon the above verse was revealed. Upon hearing the verse, the uncle said, "We obey the command of Allah and seek refuge from the great sin." He then handed the wealth over to his nephew. The second injunction is not to exchange the precious wealth with that which is inferior. This means that the guardian must not seize some valuable commodity of the orphans and substitute it with something of lesser value. People generally do this for the benefit of their own children. If the orphan possesses some property or anything of value, the guardian take these for their own children, replacing that of the orphans with something inferior. Other commentators have interpreted the verse to mean that people should not shove aside their personal halal wealth to devour the wealth of their orphan wards. This will constitute substituting something lawful good for something unlawful bad. Since the substitution of a person inferior wealth for the superior wealth of an orphan is forbidden, devouring their wealth without substituting it with something else will most surely be forbidden as well. The third instruction is that the custodian of the child should not mix his wealth with that of the orphan. People who have devious minds usurp the wealth of orphans by mixing their wealth together using various schemes. Some do, some do so absentmindedly without intending the misappropriate their wealth. They join the wealth of the orphan when purchasing household necessities and fail to accurately calculate how much is spent from the orphan's wealth. With regard to preparing the food of orphan together with that of the rest of the family, Surah Baqarah has explained the ruling. This can be referred to under the discussion of the verse they ask you concerning the orphan, verse number 220. Allah then declares with regard to the misappropriation of the orphan's wealth, it is indeed a great sin to do so. Although any form of misappropriation is a sin, this verse emphasizes the sinfulness of usurping the wealth of orphan. The verse not only declares it a sin, but a severe one indeed. Those guilty of this misdeed should recite this verse continuously and seriously reflect. Now, verse number 3. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. If you fear that you will not be able to be just to the orphans, then marry those women you are pleased with, 2, 3, or 4. If you fear that you will be unable to be impartial, then just one or those slaves that are in your possession. In this way, it is more unlikely that you will be unjust. Darul Mansoor, Volume 2, page 118 narrates from Bukhari and other books that Hazrat Urwa bin Zubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu asked his aunt, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, concerning this verse. She replied, O my nephew, this verse refers to those orphan girls whose inheritance from their fathers are mixed with the wealth of their guardians. It is obligatory that it be distributed. It then occurs that this guardian, being impressed by her wealth or beauty, may decide to wed her, since she is brought up in his home. He does not give her the dowry that is rightfully due to her. The verse instructed that they not be deprived of their rightful dowry, but in fact they should be given even more than this, narrated by Bukhari, volume 2, page 772. The verse then goes on to say that if person feel they shall be unable to be just when wedding these orphan girls, they should rather marry some other woman. These women may stipulate whatever dowry they choose, since they are not under the influence of another. However, the person who feels he will be able to give the orphan girl her just due may marry her. Darul Mansoor narrates from Ibn Jarir and others the statement of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, wherein he says that there are certain orphan girls who are wealthy. Being attracted by her wealth, the guardian marries her. Since he was never interested in the girl herself, he then neglects her and does not deal with her properly. This was referred to such people as well. Marry those women who are pleased with, 2, 3, or 4. If you fear that you will be unable to be impartial, then just one, or those slaves that are in your possession. This verse contains the permission to marry more than one woman at the same time. This is neither farz nor wajib, but merely permissible provided the person is able to be just with all of his wives. He will, of course, not be responsible if he cannot have the same love for each wife, because this is something he has no control over. However, with regard to everything else wherein he has control, he must be impartial. Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, The person who has two wives but is not just between them shall appear on the day of judgment in such a condition that one half of his body will be collapsing. He has to spend an equal number of nights with each of his wives as he decides to. Narrated by Mishkatul Musabi, page 276. There are many people who marry a second wife merely because of their affluence or just for the pleasure of it. Others do so because of the woman's wealth or because their first wife was now aged. They then deal most unjustly with their wives and even oppress them. In this way, it is more unlikely that you will be unjust. If people conduct their marriages according to the injunctions of the Sharia, they will be saved from committing injustice. The Sharia of Islam permits marriage to a maximum of 4 women at one time. However, this permission is bound with the condition of equality. Other religions do not grant this concession to man. They, however, permit men to have mistress, whereby adultery has swept into void. They see no fault in perpetrating adultery, yet look down on marriage. Many people revile Islam on the basis of the permission to marry many wives. At the outset, they fail to understand that this is merely the granting of permission and not binding obligation. They then do not perceive the practical necessity for this permission. Firstly, it serves to increase the solace and mental well being of the person. The second great benefit is that when the numbers of men are radically decreased, for example, during the occasion of jihad, when many men are martyred, widows are offered new homes and the opportunity to protect their virtue. There are also times that it occurs today that women are in the majority. During these times, women are allowed to share husbands so that they are not compelled to live their lives in sin. They are offered the opportunity to live their lives chastely as wives and mothers. Those who are too myopic to perceive the depths of matters cannot understand the wisdom and therefore to raising objections, especially when the Sharia stipulates the condition of justice and equality between wives. A person has no scope to object. There are many other conditions attached to the marriage of several wives. Amongst these are that a person may not wed a woman who is still observing her iddat. He may also not marry two sisters at the same time, nor any woman from amongst his mahram, those to whom marriage is totally forbidden. Should a person marry a fifth wife while still in the marriage of the other four, the fifth marriage will not be valid and the woman will not be considered to be his wife. During the period of ignorance, there are no restriction on the number of wives and people had many. Many and many, yes. Okay, when Hazrat Ghailan bin Salma Sakafi Raziallah Ta'ala anhu became a Muslim, he had 10 wives. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told him to keep 4 and divorce the rest. Narrated by Ibn Majah. The verse explains that if a person is unable to deal justly with 4 wives, he should suffice with 1. If he is not able to do even this, he should resort to his slave woman. While a man may lawfully cohabit with his slave woman, they do not share the same rights as wives do, although he has to feed and clothe them. He need not distribute his nights with them equally. The Kafir women who were captured during jihad were distributed amongst the mujahideen and become their slaves. It is permissible for men to cohabit with their slave women. There are many conditions attached to this, as may be referred to in the books of jurisprudence. The offspring of slave women are regarded to be the legal children of their masters and are considered to be free people. When the master dies, the slave mother of his children also becomes free. Detailed rules can be found in the books of jurisprudence. During jihad, many men and women become war captive. The Amir al-Mu'mineen has the choice of distributing them amongst the Mujahideen, in which event they will become the property of these Mujahideen. This enslavement is the penalty for kufr. The advancement to them is that they will now be exposed to the Islamic way of life, whereby they shall be afforded the opportunity to grow accustomed to it by experiencing the azan, salah, and other devotional acts of Islam. They will be drawn to accept, thereby saving themselves from the eternal chastisement of the hereafter. The advancement of the Islamic State is that this practice will weaken the enemy, presenting less danger of an uprising. The state will also be absolved of the responsibility of caring for these prisoners, thus conserving the state offers. If they are confined in prisons, they present the danger of liaising with their countries to attack the Muslims once more. As slaves, they will be of service to their mujahideen masters, who will not even feel it a burden to care for them because of their services. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned those slaves you are satisfied with should be fed as you are fed and clothed as you are clothed. Those with whom you are dissatisfied should be sold, for you should not punish the servants of Allah. Narrated by Mishkatul Musabi, page 292 from Abu Dawud and Musnad Ahmad. The inference made is that when a person is not satisfied with his slave, he would beat him excessively and neglect to care for him properly. If he is sold, he may be able to serve someone else better. When a slave is fed and clothed like the members of the household, and he is treated cordially like one of them, he will ease to consider himself a stranger. In this way, he will steadily grow to accept Islam. History bears testimony to the fact that many notable mujahideen were children of slaves. The hadiths are replete with detailed guidelines for the congenial relationship with slaves. On his deathbed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stressed that people give due regard to their slav and their slaves. Narrated by Musnad Ahmad, volume 3, page 817. This is the slavery that is ignorant people of Europe seek to discredit and object to. None of the injunctions pertaining to slavery have been abrogated in the Sharia. The reason that the Muslims of today do not have slaves is because they do not engage in jihad. Their wars are fought by the instructions of the kufr and are halted by the same felons. The Muslims have also been shackled by such treaties of the kuffar whereby they cannot enslave anyone in the event of a war. Muslims have been denied a great boon whereby every home could have had a slave. May Allah grant the Muslims the ability to escape the tentacles of the enemy, remain steadfast upon the deen, and engage in jihad according to the injunctions of Sharia. Ameen. The only slave with whom sexual relations can be maintained are those who were captured in jihad and distributed amongst the mujahideen. Besides this, there is no other way in which a person may be made a slave. The women employed in homes for domestic courses are not slaves, and it will be necessary to observe hijab from them. That is, they should be concealed from men. It is haram to engage in sexual contact with them, just as it is haram to do so with any other woman. It should be understood that deriving sexual gratification from them is no less than adultery. It is if the parents of a girl sells her as a slave, she will not be a slave in the way if she sells herself as a slave, she will not become one. Cohabitation with her will be adultery. The verse says, "Marry those women you are pleased with." This refers to those women whom a person deems to be the best and most suitable for him. The criteria for this may be beauty, wealth, character, piety, and many more qualities. The verse makes it evident that there is nothing wrong selecting a woman of one's choice, irrespective of the criteria used. However, preference should be given to piety. A narration of Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu reads, a woman is married for four reasons: for her wealth, her lineage, her beauty, and her piety. So, O listener, be successful by choosing her who is pious. May Allah grant you prosperity. Narrated by Muslim, Volume 1, page 473. According to another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The entire world is full of objects of benefit, and the best of these is the pious wife." Narrated by Muslim, Volume 1, page 475. Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The best of women who mount camels, Arab women, are those women of the Quraysh who are compassionate unto their children and protective of the wealth of their husband." Narrated by Bukhari, Volume 2, page 760. Hazrat Abu Umama radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "After taqwa, there is no boon a person can acquire better than a pious wife." He then described the traits of a pious wife thus: 1. She obeyed when instructed. 2. The husband is pleased to look at her. 3. She helps to fulfill his oaths, that is, she fulfills a task that he on oath commands her to do so. 4. She protects his wealth and her chastity in his absence. Narrated by Ibn Majah, page 133. Just as the piety of a woman is given paramount importance at the time of marriage, so too must due importance to be given to the piety of a man who proposes to a woman. Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "A woman should be given in marriage upon the proposal of such a man whom you know is of pious and upright character. If you fail to do so, widespread corruption shall reign on earth." Narrated by Tirmizi, page 207. Marriage is an instinctive necessity of man. Allah has created man desirous of woman and vice versa. Allah has ordained the institution of marriage, nikah, to fulfill this natural instinct of man and to safeguard his chastity and gaze. In the opening hadith of chapter of nikah, Tirmizi narrates a hadith on the authority of Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, four things were from the observance of the Anbiya alayhi salam, that is, modesty; 2. Applying perfume; 3. Brushing the teeth with miswak; and 4. Nikah. There is no piety in abstaining from nikah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O youth, those of you who can afford to marry should do so, for marriage is a means of lowering the gaze and protecting the chastity. Those who cannot afford to marry should stick to fasting, for it subdues the carnal desires." Narrated by Bukhari, Volume 2, page 758. There is no permission to discharge the sexual passion except within wedlock. The person unable to marry should fast according to necessity so that his passions may be kept in check. To control these desires, certain Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum requested Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the permission to castrate themselves. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, "The person who castrates another and the one who has himself castrated is not from us. The castration of my ummah lies in fasting." I hope I have pronounced this word correctly. In marriage, a man tired after a hard day's work finds solace and succor in his wife at home. Okay. This is referred to in the verse of Surah Araf where Allah says, so that he may find comfort in her. Verse number 189. The Muslim wife is absolved of the burden of earning a livelihood, protecting her chastity by remaining at home. Both the husband and the wife are given due consideration in the Sharia, and the rights of each are guarded. Husband and wife soon become parents. They then take pride in raising their children, paying much attention to their nurturing by directing their children towards Deen and the knowledge of Deen. They secure for themselves elevated position in the hereafter. Islam coincides with the mutual instincts of man and does not venture to destroy these. Within reasonable bounds, Islam allows man to fulfill these inclinations provided that he abides by the injunctions of Sharia. Verse number 4. وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن تبن لكم عن شيء منهم نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريا. Give women their dowries kindly, if they of their own accord remit a part thereof, then partake of it with welcome and happiness. In consideration of women, the Sharia has stipulated the payment of dowry called meher. The man has to pay to the woman a sum that she agrees to, and he may not force her to accept what he wishes to give. As long as he does not pay her, she will remain in debt for her for the fixed amount. If she, out of her own free will, chooses to absolve him of the amount or part thereof, she is at liberty to do so. The condition is that she do so willingly. If she is forced to do so or is tricked into signing a document to that effect, the husband will still be liable to pay her, although she can make no legal claim in a court of law. Allah shall require the husband to account for it on the inevitable day of judgment. The husband can never consider himself absolved paying the dowry unless the wife remits the same without duress. The verse stipulates that she had to do so with the happiness of the heart and not the mind. When a person sits down to think and deliberate upon a situation, the pros and cons are elevated. For example, if a person contemplates giving a bribe, he determines that by giving 20 rands as a bribe, he will save 100 rands. Although the thought appeals to the mind, the soul and heart do not want to accept. When a person requests his wife to remit the meher, she understands that by complying she will be depriving herself from a fortune which she could utilize at her liberty. On the other hand, the fear does not vacate her mind that should she refuse to remit it, her husband may divorce her in anger. Then she thinks, how long will she be forced to be burdened upon her parents and relatives? Weighing up the situation in these terms, he then opts to forego the meher, even though her heart does not concede to the deal. This form of reluctant authorization is not acceptable in the Sharia. Duress does not necessarily mean that a gun is held to the head, but it takes many forms. The above being one of them, in this case it will be haram for the husband to withhold the meher. The blanket rule is outlined in a hadith wherein Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, "Be aware not to oppress. Lo, the wealth of another is only permissible with the happiness of his heart." Narrated by Mishkat al-Musabi, page 255. Many people give money out of regard for others and do not refuse because of some degree of duress. It is not allowed to consider this wealth lawful and to accept it. Some people take the property of others in jest and then do not return it. This is also haram due to the unhappiness of the owner. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "None of you should take the can of his brother, pretending to be joking, yet earnest in the effort. Whosoever takes the can of his brother should return it. The example of a can was used to indicate that even seemingly insignificant things should not be misappropriated. Narrated by Mishkat, page 255. Then partake of it with welcome and happiness. This indicates that whatever is given out of the satisfaction of the heart is blessed, fulfilling, and pleasing. This is contrary to anything derived without consent, which will be bereft of blessings and pleasure. Verse number 5. ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا. Do not give the foolish ones your wealth which Allah has made you custodians over, but feed and clothe them thereof and speak kind words to them. 6. وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا فَادْفَعُوا عَلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُمْ وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا أَن يَكْبَرُوا وَمَن كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ وَمَن كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ فإذا دفعتم عليهم أموالهم فأشهدوا عليهم وكفى بالله حسيبا. Test the orphans till they are capable of marriage. If you notice that they understand, then hand over their wealth to them. Do not consume their wealth in extravagance and in haste, fearing that they grow up. Whoever is wealthy should abstain, and whoever is poor should eat thereof within reason. When you eventually hand over their wealth to them, then have witnesses besides over them. Allah suffice to take account. The foolish ones refer to in the first these verses are the juvenile orphans. They should all only be given their wealth when they reach the age of puberty. Then too, it should not be given to them until they are of sound judgment and understanding. If it is determined that they, after reaching puberty, will still retain childish mentality, their wealth should remain in the custody of the guardian. Their expenses should be paid from his wealth, and should they take exception to this state of affairs, it must be kindly explained to them that this is for their own welfare. The verse mentions your wealth instead of their wealth. This is mentioned to impress upon the mind of the guardian that he should safeguard the wealth of the orphan as if it were his own. He should not embezzle the funds nor squander it in any way. It also emphasizes the fact that the wealth should be protected to the extent that the guardian does not hand it over to the orphan himself until he is able to manage it properly. Another factor worth mentioning is that Allah used the word Qiyaman to describe the custodianship of the guardian over the wealth of the orphan. This word also refers to one who maintains and one who stands. This alludes to the fact that wealth is the meaning of allowing a person to be able to maintain a good standard of living and a means of standing firm in this world. The person whom Allah grants wealth should value it and not squander it on himself and his family. Wastage of wealth is haram. Hazrat Mughira bin Shoaib Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu narrates that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, undoubtedly Allah has forbidden harming or hurting mothers bearing daughters alive as was practiced by the idolaters, denying the right of the rightful and demanding from those upon whom one has no rights. Allah also disliked chit-chat, excessive questioning, and wasting of money, narrated by Bukhari, volume 1, page 324. The verse then instructs the guardians to test the mental capabilities of the orphan when he or she comes of age. Their wealth should only be given to them if they are able to manage it efficiently and wisely and will not waste it. The third injunction mentioned in the verse is that the wealth of the orphans should not be squandered in wasteful pursuits. It should also not be squandered in haste with the intention that the child will soon become of age, whereafter he or she shall demand their wealth. With this in mind, many a guardian quickly spends the wealth of himself and his children. The fourth instruction is that the guardians safeguard the orphan's wealth and not spend it upon themselves unnecessarily. The one who is wealthy should abstain from it completely, and the one who is poor may use only what is absolutely necessary. In this regard, Allama Alusi Rahmullah, the author of Ruhul Mani, volume 4, page 208, quotes four opinions. The first is that this verse applied initially but was subsequently abrogated by the verse, indeed those who oppressively consume the wealth of orphans. They only consume fire in their bellies. Surah Nisa, verse number 10. This is the opinion of Hazrat Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The second opinion is that of Hazrat Saeed bin Jubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Hazrat Mujahid rahmullah, Hazrat Abul Aliya rahmullah, Hazrat Ubaidah Salmani rahmullah, and Hazrat Muhammad Baqir rahmullah. They maintain that the poor guardian may borrow funds from the orphan's wealth. This will have to be paid back when the guardian is able to do so. The third opinion is that the poor guardian may take a wage from the wealth of the orphan in remuneration for his services to the child. This wage has to be reasonable and not excessive. An example of this is the orphan whose father has left for him many properties, businesses, houses, plantation, etc. It is obvious that a consideration amount of the guardian's time and effort will be spent in managing all these assets. He may therefore extract a salary for his services as manager. His salary should be stipulated keeping in mind the orphan's welfare. He should not take more than what will be paid to the average person for the same job. If he is required to travel for the purpose of this management, he should be conservative in spending and not waste the money in expensive hotels and restaurants. The rule is that he should desire for the orphan that he desires for himself. The fifth injunction is that witnesses be called when the wealth of the orphan is handed over to him or her. The obvious advantage of this is that the child cannot claim later that his or her wealth was not given. The precise amount being handed over should be made known to the witnesses so that they may resolve any dispute that may rise in later years. Allah suffice to take account. This verse is indeed very concise, since it serves to address the guardian who does not keep proper account of the orphan's wealth, as well as those who wish to bribe court officials to win their favors. Those people should also heed this verse who refuse to give the orphan their full due when they come of age. These people should not rest content that the paperwork of this world is in order. They will definitely be required to render account on the inevitable days of judgment. The verse stipulates that orphans should first reach the age of maturity before their wealth is handed over to them. A boy will have reached maturity when he experiences a wet dream or ejaculates. A girl may be considered to have matured when she masturbates, experiences a wet dream, or falls pregnant. If none of these things occur, each of them shall be deemed to be mature when they reach at the age of 15. According to the Islamic lunar calendar, this is the presiding verdict of the muftis. Verse number 7. لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ مِمَّا قَلَّ مِنْهُ أَوْ كَثُرَ نَصِيبٌ مَفْرُوضًا. For men is a part of what the parents and relatives leave behind, and for women is a part of what the parents and relatives leave behind, be it a little or a lot. This here has been fixed. This verse emphasizes the importance of applying the law of inheritance, underlining the need to owe a portion to men and women their allotted shares. The members of each gender have to be given their due shares from the estate of their parents and other relatives. During the period of ignorance, women were deprived of any inheritance, and even today there are many nations who do the same. It is common that only those people receive inheritance who are in control of the state at the time of the death. Even if others have to be given, the wives and daughters are ignored. When the deceased leaves two wives and their respective children, the children in charge of the estate do not share the inheritance with the stepmother and her children. People even deprive orphans of their rightful share and pay no heed to the injunctions of the Sharia in this regard. They give due importance to Salah and other acts of devotion, yet are negligent of one of the most fundamental and binding laws of Islam, those of inheritance. The verse makes it clear that just as men and women receive an allotted portion from the estate of their deceased parents, they are also entitled to a part of the estate of various relatives. The details of these can be referred to in the books of jurisprudence. Now, verse number 8, 9, and 10. وَإِذَا حَضَرَ الْقِسْمَةَ أُولُو الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينُ فَارْزُقُوهُم مِّنْهُ وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. When the relatives, orphans, and needy present themselves upon the occasion of the distribution of the estate, then apportion some of it to them and speak kindly to them. 9. وَلْيَخْشَ الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خِلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. Let those fear who leave behind them weak offspring regarding whom they are concerned. They should fear Allah and speak justly. 10. إن الذين يأكلون أموال اليتامى ظلما إنما يأكلون في بطونهم نارا وسيصلون سعيرا. Indeed, those who oppressively consume the wealth of orphan, they only consume fire in their bellies. Very soon they shall enter the blaze. If it often happens that at the time when an estate is being distributed amongst the rightful heirs, certain other relatives, orphans, and needy people also present themselves with a view to receiving something. When this does happen, some of the mature heirs should give them something from their own shares and kindly explain to them that they are not entitled to any shares. Only those people allotted shares by Allah are to receive anything, and they should be pleased with that Allah has decreed. Thereafter, those who are responsible for the executing of the state are addressed. Allah tells them that they should hasten to distribute the shares to all the heirs and beneficiaries, since amongst these they may be weak and needy people. If the distribution is delayed, these people could suffer. Therefore, they should think that if it were their state being dissolved and their feeble heirs were not given their dues timelessly, what will become of them? By placing themselves in the same situation, they will become more concerned to ensure that they fulfill their task quickly. They should fear Allah and distribute their estate correctly, ensuring that the shares of minor heirs are placed in the custody of such people who will care properly for the child and keep their wealth safely. There should be such people who will pacify the minor heirs practically by giving them their wealth upon maturity, as well as verbally, by being kind and gentle in their behavior towards them. Allah then announces that those who unlawfully usurp the wealth of orphan should rest assured that their action will not pass undetected. Indeed, the consequences shall be grievous on the day of judgment, when rendering account for devious actions will not be easy. In this world, the innocent child may not be able to tell the guardian anything, but in the hereafter, the unjust guardian will be subjected to the most gruesome for torture on account of his oppression. Although it seems that he is eating sumptuous meals with his ill gotten gains, in reality, he is only filling his belly with the smoldering coals of Jahannam. Those people who deprive orphans of their wealth during the distribution of estate should ponder over this verse. There are others who are just as guilty when they collect funds to run orphanage and then spend most of the money on themselves. Then legacy are not suitably settled. The wealth of many an orphan is devoured by others who are not in the least concerned about the consequences. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.